embassy in Syria. Good afternoon, Asek.
Yeah, good afternoon, mate.
There are Filipinos near those areas affected by the airstrike, sir, in and around Damascus. The DFA has just tweeted there are no reports of Filipino casualties. Can you confirm this?
Yes, our embassy in Damascus continues to check with members of the Filipino community. We have about 500 in Damascus right now and 1,000 in all of Syria.
So there are around 1,500 Filipinos. Can you explain to us the labor situation in Syria? I understand a deployment ban is still in place.
We said that the figure from Ambassador Crescente Relacion is that we have around 1,000 all over Syria.
Okay, lahat ba ito documented and they haven't asked to be repatriated since the war broke out, sir?
We would assume that all of the 1,000 are registered with the embassy. In 2011, when the Syrian civil war broke out, and we had to impose a total ban of labor deployments, we had about 17,000 Filipinos there. But now we only have about
Asekato. Yes, so around 16,000 na po, more or less, ang mga na-repatriate since the war broke out in 2011.
Yes, yes, that's correct.
So alert level 4 is raised. That means repatriation is still ongoing. Are there many requests from our kababayans to be brought home?
According to Ambassador Relacion, there are about 20 Filipinos in the embassy right now awaiting repatriation. Those who are still there include Filipinos who are spouses of Syrian nationals. So the rest would be household service workers who have not requested to be repatriated or who refuse to be repatriated.
So, kamusta po ang embassy staff? We have 10, I understand, embassy staff in Damascus. So all of them are safe and accounted for, sir. How is the government ensuring they are safe?
Yeah, we're in touch with them immediately after the missile strikes were reported. And Ambassador Relacion reported that some of the missiles landed as close as 1 kilometer from the embassy and his residence. All of them are okay, and they're now checking on the situation of our kababayans there.
1 kilometer is very close, sir. Does this raise alarm bells? Baka mag-relocate po ba ang mga embassy staff?
We're waiting for their report, but it seems the targets were military installations in and around Damascus and in at least 2 other areas in Syria. But so far, wala naman sinasabi si Ambassador Relacion na kailangan mag-relocate ang ating mga personnel doon. So they're all okay.
The U.S. says strikes would continue until Syria ends its use of chemical weapons. So hindi pa siguro tapos itong military action na ito from the U.S. and its allies. And also, what assistance is available for those who could be affected, Asek?
Well, the policy is to repatriate anyone who wants to go home to the Philippines, and the embassy in Damascus is ready to do that. As of 5 minutes ago, Ambassador Relacion said that there has been a lull in the missile strikes.
Is there a hotline, sir, that they can call for emergencies or any concerns?
I don't have the numbers right now, but the embassy will post that in their embassy webpage and Facebook account. Actually, the embassy has already been issuing advisories as early as several days ago in anticipation of possible missile strikes. Kaya alam ng community natin doon how to get in touch with the embassy in case of emergency.
All right. Asek El Mercato, thank you for taking our call.
Thank you.
We will continue to monitor this breaking news story very closely and will bring you information as they become available. Moving on to local news, after more than a year of delay, the election period for the barangay and Sangguniang Kabataan polls will finally push through. Aspirants are now filing their certificates of candidacy in COMELEC satellite offices nationwide. Let's get the latest from our correspondent, Rex Damitio, joining us live from Caloocan City, where the country's biggest barangay is also located. Hi, Rex. What's the latest there?
Well, here at the COMELEC office in the 1st District of Caloocan City, it looks like it's already election day. As you can see right behind me are crowds of supporters cheering for their candidates, wearing the same uniform, bringing their banners, their balloons, and other leaflets. Here in the 1st District of Caloocan City is where the biggest barangay in the country in terms of population is located, and that is Barangay Bagong Silang. It has more than 240,000 residents, and 92,000 of them are registered voters. That's why lines of aspirants waiting to file their COCs are quite long from time to time, and they bring with them their crowds of supporters. One of them is Rodel Yadaw, a candidate for barangay chairman of Barangay Bagong Silang. He also claims he is a pastor and a character actor on some sitcoms. After decades of mismanagement, he says it's time for a significant change in their barangay. He also slammed candidates and sitting officials in the barangay.
Narariyan yung mambababae, narariyan yung mga iba't ibang klaseng bisyo. Sa amin pong team, wala pong umiinom dito. Wala pong mga bisyo at hinuhubog ko po sila na sila'y magkaroon ng takot sa Diyos.
Election Officer Roderick Villostas is expecting thousands of candidates will vie for positions in Bagong Silang and other barangays. That's why, unlike the polls in other barangay, they need to do a sub-canvassing of votes in Barangay Bagong Silang after the election day.
Para sa isang barangay, kasi kung walang sub-canvassing, ang aming estimate sa Bagong Silang alone, it would take them minimum of 4 days to proclaim kung sino yung mga nanalo sa Bagong Silang.
They're also keeping an eye on Sangguniang Kabataan aspirants who has a relative in local and national posts. This is the first time where the anti-political dynasty in the SK will be tested. Candidates in the SK elections must not have relatives within the second degree of consanguinity occupying a post in the local and national levels. Second-degree relatives include grandparents, grandchildren, brothers, sisters, parents-in-law, daughters-in-law, and sons-in-law. Villostas says so far, no one has yet to violate the rule. If in case there is one, they will still accept the COC. However, the COMELEC main office will decide if they should be disqualified or not. The period for the filing of COCs will last until Friday at 5 p.m. May.
Rex, what are the reminders of our election officials to the candidates or aspirants?
The COMELEC is advising aspirants to file their COCs as soon as possible, and it is also better to file their COCs on weekends, either today or tomorrow, so as not to interrupt the operations of other offices in different city halls on weekdays. Mine.
Thank you for the update, Rex Demetrio, live from Caloocan City. In other news, CNN's Chrissy Lustout sat down with Foreign Affairs Secretary Alan Peter Cayetano. They discussed the upcoming shutdown of Boracay and how the government will help workers and residents affected.
Boracay, and it was recently declared a cesspool by President Duterte because of the overbuilding, because of pollution, etc. This tourist destination will be shut down for 6 months, which is a long period of time for the people who rely on tourism for their livelihood. Why 6 months? It seems pretty extreme.
The truth is that Boracay, there's impunity. Over the last 20, 30 years, the president wants to use Boracay, one, to fix it directly, secondly, as an example to all other tourist destinations that, let's get our act together.
I was just speaking to my colleague, Alexandra Field, who was just in Boracay filing a story on this, and she said, it's not a cesspool. The Boracay is still beautiful, and it begs the question, why shut it down for 6 months?
It's beautiful, but what is a cesspool? I can give you the data found where the waste is going, and if your colleague would swim there, I wouldn't. The president didn't say it's a total mess, but it's going there.
Will the government support the community there?
First, let me emphasize, the president has always promised tough action and swift action. So, there's no in-between. So those will be gravely affected, the workers. We've put 2 billion pesos. We've computed how much 34,000 people, half our residents, half our workers would need for 6 months. Now for the businesses, it's a question of, do they want to lose money for 6 months but have Boracay for eternity?
The United States and its allies end a round of strikes on Syria as they send a clear message to the regime to stop chemical weapons attacks. The strike was in response to a deadly attack in the city of Douma last week. Reports say dozens were killed and around 500 people may have been affected in that chemical attack. Earlier, U.S. President Donald Trump addressed America, saying this military action was in coordination with France and the United Kingdom. President Trump also criticized Russia and Iran for their support of the Syrian regime. Let's listen to part of what he said.
The purpose of our actions tonight is to establish a strong deterrent against the production, spread, and use of chemical weapons. Establishing this deterrent is a vital national security interest of the United States. The combined American, British, and French response to these atrocities will integrate all instruments of our national power, military, economic, and diplomatic. We are prepared to sustain this response until the Syrian regime stops its use of prohibited chemical agents. I also have a message tonight for the two governments most responsible for supporting, equipping, and financing the criminal Assad regime. To Iran and to Russia, I ask, what kind of a nation wants to be associated with the mass murder of innocent men, women, and children? The nations of the world can be judged by the friends they keep. No nation can succeed in the long run by promoting rogue states, brutal tyrants, and murderous dictators. In 2013, President Putin and his government promised the world that they would guarantee the elimination of Syria's chemical weapons. Assad's recent attack and today's response are the direct result of Russia's failure to keep that promise.
Trump indicated strikes would continue until Syria ends its use of chemical weapons. Meanwhile, the Pentagon says the precision airstrikes were meant to send a message and not to harm civilians.
It was not only a strong message to the regime that their actions were inexcusable, but it also inflicted maximum damage without unnecessary risk to innocent civilians.
Analysts weigh in on the risks of the offense strategy to U.S. troops and opportunities to boost defense capability against Syrian targets.
They have the capability of essentially staying out of Syrian airspace, either over the Mediterranean to the west or in other airspace of surrounding countries, and firing into Syria towards Damascus, towards any of the targets they may be wanting to hit. But this is significant now because, of course, a year ago, we only saw cruise missiles being used. The fact that they are using pilots, manned aircraft, I mean, it certainly does add an element of risk, even if they stay out of Syrian airspace. They want to stay as far offshore as they can because of those Russian and Syrian radars and missiles that could be capable of shooting them down. It was just several weeks ago, an Israeli F-16 flying back from a mission in Syria was shot down.
When you look at the presence of U.S. and allied capabilities that are currently in the region, what you have in each one of these, clearly you've got ships that are coming into the Mediterranean, and you've got pre-positioned capabilities here that can strike into Syria. By bringing in aircraft, what that does, as Barbara indicated, it certainly increases the risk, but it increases the capabilities of multiple attack angles going against targets in Syria. That puts the air defense capabilities that the Russians and the Syrians have at a higher state of alert and can spoof and can confuse them. Let me move to this. Clearly, this is a depiction of what the capabilities are in terms of Russian air defense. Most of those are located here at Latakia and Tartus, those two seaports that are in the Mediterranean. This is the distance that the Russians can reach with their capabilities that are indicated here. This is a mobile capability that they have with that range of about 250 miles. It's important to realize this mobility allows them to move that circular defense capability throughout throughout the map.
Hey, General, I just want to quickly tell you,
Sure.
Syrian state media is now reporting that their air defenses have engaged U.S., French, and British targets. That's according to the Syrian regime. Again, take that for what it's worth.
Take it for what it's worth and what that probably means. Again, as has been reported, the capabilities are coming from cruise missiles, precision-guided munitions that have a standoff capability. No U.S. aircraft will go into this very contested airspace. There's no reason that would, by doing that, that would increase either an attack capability or an effect that we want to try to, that the United States or the allies want to try to achieve on the ground. That can be achieved from a standoff capability.
You know, it's interesting. CNN has been reporting that messages are being passed or have been passed to Moscow about the U.S. and allies' intentions to create a lasting deterrent against the use of chemical weapons. In what level of information would the U.S. pass along to Russia in advance of a strike like this? Obviously, a great concern to General Mattis and others has been you know, a direct confrontation between the U.S. U.S. forces and Russian forces in Syria.
Correct. Anderson, this is the challenge. This is the visualization that we get to. These are locations where Syrian aircraft and other capabilities are. For example, here's the capital of Damascus, where we already know attacks are ongoing. What we see here in red are locations where Russian forces, not just aircraft, but ground forces, logistics capabilities, intelligence capabilities, to include ground capabilities, coexist with Syrian forces. The challenge is if chemical capabilities are at any of these locations, you now have a very precise requirement to ensure collateral damage can be determined.
The Russian ambassador to the U.S. reacts strongly to the airstrikes in a statement. Anatoly Antonov accused the West of carrying out a pre-designed scenario. He said there would be consequences, adding the U.S. has no moral right to blame other countries since it possesses a large arsenal of chemical weapons of its own.
Are you guys okay? I can hear you. Are you guys okay? Yes. Show me you are okay. Will you please stand up? All of you stand up. Show me you are okay. Can you put your right hand up as high as you can get? You go get. And put your left hand up as high as you can get. Put them together. Louder. Louder. Okay. Thank you very much. Now that we will be expanding ovation, I may not sit down. If you will look at your watches, it's not 4 or 6. By the program, officially I should be speaking. If I were to follow the program, I should not take it on and say, best up. Of course, I will not do that. And so today, I come before you today to make a presentation. What transformation projects are around? But before that, let me greet the officers and friends of the Asian Development Plan. And also, good afternoon. The Asian Development Plan has been a very good partner in our efforts to do infrastructure projects in this golden age of infrastructure. Allow me to say to you today, good afternoon. To the locators of the North Development Zone, it's nice to be back and it's nice to see you again. For the record, I would like to state that if the North Development Zone continues to grow development well, it is because of well-being, committed and trusting locators like you. I know because I have been with you for 3.5 years. So you hold up, all of you. Thank you very much for the trust and confidence you have given not only to Prague, not only to CDC, but more importantly to the leadership of President Duterte. Maraming salamat po sa inyo. To my friends in Prague, Development Corporation, President Duterte, maraming saludo po sa inyo. You have done very well. And you made life that really city. Please continue to move and keep the enthusiasm lesson the spirit of growth and development defined, going and going. For the record, the Duterte Corporation has fostered in 12 months of operation 1 billion pesos. That surpasses 1 billion pesos. By any standards, that is very high. And I salute you for this. To my fellow servants in government, to all of you, good afternoon. You know, my task today, thank you, sir. My task today is to present to you what has been done, what is being undertaken right now, what is supposed to be planned, and what are the programs that are in place. To make sure that we put up the structure and the platform upon which the Department of Transportation in its own way can add to the meaning of golden age of infrastructure in the Republic of the Philippines. There is no doubt, and it is a given hypothesis, that if you want to develop, you want to grow, there's got to be infrastructure. Infrastructure must be developed in order for any economy to have its best and to really go and grow. The Philippines is no exception, so that President Duterte said, you want to grow, you want to develop, let's put up infrastructure. And to put where our plan is, I will put the wallet in my mouth, and he said, I budgeted more than 7 trillion so that the infrastructure can be planned, implemented, and realized. Today, let me tell you certain things which are being done in the Department of Transportation. 4 parts my presentation shall be. I will show you what is being done in so far as the airports are concerned. I will show you what is being done in so far as rails are concerned, and I will give you a glimpse of what is being done in so far as road infrastructure are concerned, shining away from bridges and roads, because that is the turf and territory of the Department of Public Works. I hope that in this small presentation that I will make, I can show you what is being done so far as maritime is concerned, so that at the end of my presentation, you can rightfully say and share with me what is stated, that indeed the Department of Transportation, so far as mission and performance is concerned, is not only MRT3, it is more and a lot more. Let me now do my presentation, and let's go to the airport. There was a moment in time when the Manila International Airport was listed as one of the worst airports in the world. That was one moment in time. Recently, a few months before, as we speak, that tag of being one of the worst airports in the Philippines has been shattered by the classification that NAIA, Terminals 1, 2, 3, and 4, is now one of the most improved airports in the world. There was a moment in time when punctuality record, in so far as flying time is concerned, is below 50%. That was a moment in time. In the first year of operation of President Duterte Administration, that moment in time is gone, because the average punctuality, in so far as flying time is concerned, is more than 70%. And mind you, ladies and gentlemen, these numbers did not come from us. It came from international organizations. And not to be outdone, in the recent safety audit done by ICAO. ICAO is the organization that monitors the performance of airports all over the world. ICAO said the rating of the Philippines is close to 70%. Compare that to the international record of 63% thereabouts. Compare that further to the record of the Philippines, which was below 50%. Indeed, you will agree with me that change has arrived. In terms of policies, in terms of systems, in terms of procedures that we, during the time of President Duterte, has implemented. But today we talk of infrastructures. What have we done so far as infrastructure is concerned? Let me put you into a glimpse and walk you through to certain things which we have done. Number one, when we assumed there were only 3 radars in the Republic of the Philippines. As we talk, in 32 years of the Duterte administration, those 3 radars were increased to 13 radars. In other words, an increment of 10 radars in a period of less than 2 years. Such that we were able to put up and complete and fix what we call the communication application surveillance system air traffic command and command. If you have time, see for yourself and see the structure that was put up wherein this is an edifice that is committed to monitoring all the flying objects in the Philippine skies and in the Philippine jurisdiction. Pupunta ka doon, ala James Bond. Tignan mo, umintun ka ng totoo, tignan mo, pakikita mo, yung mga bagay-bagay na lumilipit, and more importantly, as you see the objects that fly, you can monitor in real time. But in real time, the punctualities of aircraft. So that with this structure, we will not only monitor punctuality, but more importantly, we can monitor the safety and security of the Philippine hemisphere. Indeed, this is a system that was put up in 32 years of the Duterte administration. But as we talk about our system, let's go to specific. Let's go to specific airports. We know about Puerto Princesa for long. Puerto Princesa is in there. Boss, tapos na ho yung Puerto Princesa, and if you visit Palawan and go to Puerto Princesa, we will say, alas and aha, this we have a good airport. Tapos na, completed. In 1.5 years of the Duterte administration, you go a little bit, you know, a little bit. Let's talk about pride. Pride for many administrations. They say we must have and improve the terminals of pride. They say we must add flights in pride. They say the domestic operations and the international operations that the bound must be in pride. Today is not about talks. Today is not about talks. Let's talk about reality. Today, I tell you, with President Vince of the CDA, I tell you, the second terminals will be completed in operation in 2.5 years, so that we can accommodate 8 million passengers. Today, as we talk, what originally was the flight in part amounting to 70 is now 200 flights or so. Today, as we talk, several airlines all over the world have been negotiating with us for landing rights, have been negotiating with us to do business in Prague. What are we talking about? The seeds for the growth of Prague as an international airport is indeed planted, and more importantly, harvest is supposed to come. We talk about airport, we can talk about Puerto Princesa, we talk about Prague, we talk about Bohol. You know, Bohol? We basically started ground zero in Bohol. That was immediately when President Duterte assumed his new administration. Today, I tell you, it is almost complete. Today, I tell you, it is targeted that it will be commercially operational by August of this year. Ladies and gentlemen, by any standards, the plans which we said that there should be more airports is already increased. And so you have Puerto Princesa, you have Prague, you have Palau. Let's go a little bit closer, Mr. Moderator. North. You know, inunahan ako, Mactan Cebu. By Mactan Cebu, the terminal will be completed. Bills will be inaugurated June of this year. You call that performance? It is performance. And so you have territorial improvements in various parts of the Philippines. Baka sasabihin the Bicol Airport in a period of 3 years. And as we go to Bicol, paano naman sa Norte, sir? Inopen na ko namin sa Norte, yung Lalo Airport, International Airport. And then sa Norte, we already made into Araw. We made that already migrated and we have completed the new terminal. In other words, if you look at the geography of the Philippines, north, south, beside us, there are developments going on. We have migrating capacity. When we started in the administration of President Duterte, there were only 13 or so migrated airports. In the first year of our administration, President Duterte's administration, we have completed the migrating of 4 or 5 airports. And this year, we will complete another 5 or 6 migrated, so that at the end of the term of President Duterte, all the 42 commercially operational airports would have been migrated. That is the plan. And so you say, migrated. Migrated, sir, is a situation where you can fly. You can fly even at sunset. In other words, the operating capability of the airports will be improved such that yung NAIA will be operational even after 1 o'clock in the morning. And what does it mean? There will be more travel, as there will be more movement, as there will be more connectivity. Earlier today when I got here, one of you approached me and frankly asked me, Mr. Secretary, why are you considering the airport of Bulacan? And I said, sir, why should I not? You listen to my speech. I will deviate from my preparation and I will answer the question why we are entertaining Bulacan and why we are entertaining Sandy if there will be. Let's speak of realities. Realities in NAIA, that NAIA will not last forever. Because it is presently situated in a place which is openly congested and technology in airline traffic has improved. In fact, only a week ago, on the papers they were saying you will not travel by supersonic speed. You try landing with the supersonic aircraft. They will tell us what will happen in the surrounding. My feeling, it will be 8 to 9 years, at most 10 years. That is the lifespan of NAIA. Why? Because of the congested area and because of the technology at the airport. And therefore, as we develop time, we have to look for other possibilities. There is an unsolicited offer for Bulacan. An unsolicited offer and a proposal of the government arrangement in Istanbul. I will entertain them. First come, first serve. Because if you develop the runways in Bulacan and Prague, if you develop the runways in Bulacan and Prague, you will have added capacity of runways. Today you have seen growth and improvement in the traveling public in the Philippines, as you have seen growth in tourism. Today I see that NAIA will not last. Well, it starts to operate as an airport. It is the vision of an economic cluster, including finance, mega, budget, public works and transportation. What is our dream? What is our vision? To transform the area that is known as NAIA, Terminal 1, 2, 3, and 4 into an economic development. Please know that that area is bigger than BGC. If you will develop that into a real estate development, then you create a real estate development program where we can have parks. You will start from ground zero, and therefore, you will have clouds. If you have Bulacan, and if you will have sun, then NAIA is close from real estate development. Then you are now ready for airport and aviation important. Why do you want airports? Why do you want multiple airports? Because one, you want to give the riding public, the passengers, the freedom of choice. When you give them the freedom of choice, then they will have to choose not only what airport to use, but more importantly, what airline to pay for, what fares to pay, and in what time you travel. If you have limited airports, you take away the freedom of choice on the right hand. And so this is the aviation plan. Airports all over the Philippines will be developed, it will be improved. And you in businesses who are in the airport, come to us. Come and visit, share with us, contribute and help us in developing our airport. And so we talk about rails. As of today, the rail population of the Philippines is 77 kilometers. 77 kilometers. As of today, in relation to the term of the President, our plan, when the term of the President ends, we shall have 1,900 kilometers of railways. And the President said, let's do that. Where did it come from? We are in track, let's start the track. There will be a rail system from Tutuban to Malolos to San Fernando, Angeles, right? And extended to the Clark Green City, which will be presented by President Prince in a short while. And as we do that, Clark and Subic will be connected by a cargo rail, and we will start construction and building by next year. Where are the rails coming from? The rails are coming from the South Railway. The railways in Bicol, coming from Tutuban to Los Baños, Cotalamba, traversing Batangas, going to Bicol. And as we develop Bicol and Central Luzon, we will start for the first time the railway in Mindanao. The first phase will be started by next week, covering Davao, Digos, Tagum, and Digos, the first phase. The total Mindanao Express is positioned to cover more than 700 kilometers of rails. These are all being planned. But as we do this, MRT7, MRT2, connectivity in Central Luzon, these are all being started now. Before, there were other plans, but not acted, plans that were not acted upon. Connecting Baclaran to Bacoor to Cavite, connecting Quezon City up to San Jose Bulacan. These are all the rails. But what is the icing on the cake? What is the prime touch? The subway. The Manila subway. This is a subway that will start in Quezon City and in Manila, covering 16 or 15 stations. Then we said, and we announced, the partial availability will be the name of the game. The partial availability will cover 3 stations in Quezon City: North Avenue, Mindanao Avenue, and Tandang South. And then all of a sudden, you hear whispers, you hear doubts, and they say in curiosity, that's definitely. My friends, why do you act like that? When we have plans, why do you have to accompany it with doubt? Why do you have to accompany it with sarcasm? Why don't you pray for us so that those projects will materialize? Because it is not us that will benefit, it will be the majority. President said, let's do the partial availability. Yes, sir, we will do the partial availability. How can it happen? Prime Minister Ate signed the agreement with the President during their visit. The law branch has been approved and signed between China and the Department of Finance. The mechanism for it to be operational is already in place. Help us so that this thing can materialize, so that we can say at the end of the day, hey, members of the world, we also have our own subway. where 4 or 5 Taipans were fighting each other, nagdemandahan na sa Supreme Court. They agree. They already agreed on the common station. The share of the Ayala Group is already been done. The share of the government is already in the bidding process. However, the common station will be completed in a period of 2.5 years as we commence construction. And so, these are the things being done so far as well. In the interest of time, I will shy away a little bit on MIT. That's it. MIT has been the focus of the issue, tested and thrown at us. We accepted this ridicule challenges in the quiet of our heart. And so, during the holiday, people of MIT sacrifice dedication and sacrifice the holiday break, which Filipinos look forward to and work. For the last 12 days or so, there was no unlocking. It was smooth. There was no trouble. It went smooth. Today, we have the first unlock at 8:14 or 8:15 in the morning. Mr. ADB, do you know the cause? Because there is an Egypt who put pressure on the Lord, pinilit ng pasok habang sarado ng Egypt. It's not about parts, it's not about, it's an Egypt like this passenger. My instruction, identify this person. And from now on, if they can be identified, I told MRT this afternoon, 5 cases against that person and correct damages from them. Things of that sort. MRT can be handled. It can be handled overnight. We have a similar situation like the Station of the Cross to handle MRT. Your transportation department is willing to walk those stations of the cross so that the public can enjoy an MRT as efficient and as reasonable within the confines of the state of what it is now. And so we talk about aviation, we talk about rails. Let's take a look a little bit